Ladies and gentlemen, this is Joe's Classic Video Games back with another cool pinball repair video for you this evening. We are working on this Stern Flight 2000 pinball machine, one of my favorite games. Somebody had apparently been parting the thing out, so they took the power supply out of it, they took the lock bar off of it, and the lock bar receiver, the solenoid board, 3 of the displays. But you know what? We're putting it all back in it. Yeah, that's right. We're going back the other way. We're not going to let them part out such a fine game. It needs a little work, but it's getting there. So if you didn't watch, in the previous video, we worked on the power supply. It was completely missing, so we were able to take a power supply out of one where it mounts in the back box. It was actually out of a Stingray, Stern Stingray. And make a new board mount for the bottom like the original one, and then mount it on that board. The original one was similar to this, but it's missing. Somebody took it out and sold it. But we just put it back in. So we've got the power working. We rebuilt the board a little bit, or serviced the board a little bit. Repinned the connectors, tested all the voltages. Everything seems really cool. So we've got illumination lights on, and that's about it so far, because we don't have a solenoid board in the background, in the back box. So whenever you're working on a big project like this one, we just like to take it a step at a time. So the first thing that happens is the power comes in the plug out of the wall, into the game, over there to that filter, and then it comes into the power supply, which is the rectifier board. The rectifier board and the transformer. So we've got all of that doing what it's supposed to do. So the next thing it does is it sends power back up into the back box to the solenoid driver board. So we're going to mess with that next. So let me take off that back glass and we will show you what's supposed to be back there and what's missing. So as you can see, several of the displays are missing, but we're not messing with that right now. We're going step by step, people. Step by step. When the power comes up, it goes through this loom over to here and plugs into the solenoid board, which is missing. You can buy those new. They're about $100, and I've got a bunch of used ones. So we're going to rebuild a used one and put it in. Now, after we do that, the other boards are present. So this MPU, the damage isn't that bad. That thing might boot up. We might get lucky here. So we'll see. I've been looking for clues as to when the last thing this thing worked was, but I don't see anything with a date on it that's anywhere near recent. So I don't know. That's factory stuff. So I don't know. I'm not sure when the last time they had it up and running is, but you know what? We might see it up and running at the end of this video. But we're going piece by piece. So I need to go find one of these solenoid boards. Any of them from a Bally will work. Any of them from a Stern will work. So it's not that big of a deal. And I've got several parts ones in the back. We'll find one that looks fairly clean, or at least cleanable, and then see if we can service it and get it doing its thing. All right, folks, so I got a whole box of these things, but they're all in pretty rough shape. So we're going to pull one of them out and use it to fix, to repopulate the one missing in the cabinet. So this is a Bally. The design is from March of '78. See how it says replacement for AS251816. The difference is they added like a fuse for the high voltage area and a couple minor changes. Some of it is on the traces and things like that. Just slightly different layout, but they all work the same. So this one obviously has been messed with before. It's missing a chip here. I believe that's a 74154, I think that is. Don't quote me on that. We'll see here in a second. We'll look at another one. It's some kind of decoder. So basically the MPU, when it's running, talks over here to the board through this connector, a few lines, and it sends lines to here, which control these 3 chips, and these 3 chips control all of the transistors to make the coils work, the solenoids work. So that's why they got the solenoid driver board. So the bottom half of the board is a separate thing, okay? And this one's missing that chip. It wouldn't be that big of a deal. This part of the board is the voltage regulator. So it takes the 12 volts and turns it into 5 volts. And then the 5 volts runs all the chips on all of the boards, including this board. Okay, so it's like from here over. And then this part of the board is the high voltage area, where it takes the 250 or whatever it is from the rectifier board for the lamp, the displays, and it turns it into a voltage that you could adjust with this potentiometer. So you try to set it at 190, I think was what it originally was set at, but most people try to put it at 175 or 180 because by lowering the voltage on the displays a little bit, you save the plasma displays a little bit. Now, if you're putting LED displays in it, this whole section doesn't even need to work. So you can take that fuse out and just leave it out. But I think we're going to go with the original displays on this one, so we'll get that up and running, and it'll look cool. Now, this board here, it's missing the voltage regulator, it's missing that big decoder chip, it's missing the fuse holder, it needs all the updates. So it's fairly clean. As by clean, I mean not too hacked up. So it's a candidate, but hopefully we've got one in a little better shape than that. By the way, that's the flipper enable relay. So here is a Bally says 15-81. So maybe that's the 15th week of 81? I don't know. I know one thing. There were not 15 months in 1981. But it has the same part number. Okay. Same setup. The decoder chip is a 74154. And these little chips are CA3081, it says. The other one, it's a ULN 2081. ULN 2081. These say 3081. Whatever. This one, notice it has a pin bent over. You know, that pin being bent over may have caused this not to work for somebody. This one's complete. Looks pretty good. There is a little plastic shield that's supposed to go in here, just so you can't accidentally touch something. It also has a newer potentiometer on it, which means I've probably worked on it at some point. But I never replaced that, so maybe not. Maybe somebody else did. But that's a pretty clean, complete board, so perhaps that will be the one. Looks pretty good. We'll put this over here in the maybe pile. Okay. Next is one of the earlier driver boards from Bally, so it's the -16. Okay. This is a complete parts board, really. I mean, the flipper enable relay is missing. This plastic piece is just broken. You can take it off. The other ones it's completely missing. But all that looks pretty good. Wire broke on the 5-volt capacitor, filter capacitor, but we replaced that anyway. The voltage regulator is missing. I think that's an LM323. And then you've got the decoders missing, and looks like it was kind of roughly taken out. And then one of the driver chips. Yeah, this one says CA3081 as well. One of them's missing, so you got 2 chips missing. I don't know, folks. That one's kind of a little bit of a basket case. So then we get to this one. It has a note with it. It says, date, June 29th. Bally solenoid driver, returned by Wilson Amusements in Vermont. 160 microfarad. 100 volt, is that what it says? Cap. I don't know if that was this one though. I think it's this cap here would have been the one they're talking about. Well, you know, it does look like somebody replaced it at some point. Okay, so this one though, it's one of the slightly newer ones from August of '78 maybe. Also missing the decoder chip. It does have the plastic shield on it, so maybe we can rob that if we need it. It's missing the whole heatsink for the voltage regulator. It's missing part of the fuse clamp and part of one of the resistors up here. But it's not too far gone. Another one of the older ones. Missing the flipper relay, missing the regulator or whatever for the whatever this part is for the high voltage, missing the capacitor for the high voltage, a resistor, both of these transistors. This is one of the early ones with no fuse, so they're not quite as nice. There's a resistor missing here. The driver chip's missing. Two of the other chips, or all three of the other chips are missing. The voltage regulator is missing, and the heat sink. So there's not much more there than the actual board, you know, which isn't in too bad a shape. I mean, you could just repopulate it with everything. Yeah, you know, it's not the end of the world. You could order that chip and those three chips, maybe be in that $6. You could order a kit to rebuild all this. It might be another $10. The heatsink we probably got on another one. Well, we definitely have on another one. $30 would probably rebuild the whole thing. Okay. So then we've got this one. This was in that lot of stuff that we got the other day. But it's kind of rough, so you had a transistor down here burn up. Send smoke all the way up the board. Same here. So all that would need to be cleaned up. That's really rusty. So it's not the greatest. And then we have this one. I like the looks of this one. It's damaged here, but it's actually a stern. Right? Now, the stern and the valleys are completely interchangeable, so it doesn't have to be a stern. But since we're putting it in a Flight 2000, it's kind of cool to put the stern one in the game that it was supposed to be in, right? So we'll do that. I like this one. It's pretty cool. It's also one of the versions with a fuse, so that's good. Somebody's already replaced the filter capacitor, so we don't have to mess with that. We'll see if we can clean this up a little bit. But yeah, we're looking pretty good. So I think we'll focus on this one, and then we'll put the other ones up for now. But I think this will be our one that we use in it. Okay, so I'm going to show you the back of the board and some of the little upgrades we do. Now, all of these upgrades we started doing years ago because I learned how to fix machines by reading Clay at penrepair.com, and he suggested these and others. So I kind of started doing them on my own, and it's made the boards pretty reliable over the years. Knock-on particle board, okay? So basically, mainly what you do is you upgrade a bunch of the grounds, because you run into this problem where a lot of the ground connections go through one pin on the connector. But if you tie a lot of the grounds together on the board, the solenoid board, it makes things seem to function a little better. Okay, so I'll show you what I mean. So that right here is the 5-volt filter cap. Okay. Someone's already replaced it, but you see how it has two traces there? It says positive and negative. Well, the negative trace comes over to here and connects to one pin on this connector. Okay. So if you look in the schematics, we are looking at This is the 5-volt regulator. Right. Here's our big cap. So the ground for this cap is coming from the transformer bridge and ground, right? So if you look back at the power supply, it comes back to one of these ground connections. So all these are grounded on the power supply. So one line comes from this power supply, the rectifier board that we were messing with in the bottom, and goes up and connects right there. Okay? So what we're doing with this mod is we're connecting this ground that's grounded back at the power supply board, at the rectifier board, to this ground on the actual board. Okay? So the way we're doing that is there is a ground. This is actually the ground test point right here. There's a ground just below it. So if you tie that together, now that doesn't have to get its ground from a different pin, or from that one pin. It's all connected together here. So it's connected together at the rectifier board, and then it runs to the solenoid board, and the grounds are separate. But we're connecting them together at the solenoid board as well. I've heard people say, oh, you're not supposed to do that. Works good for me. I haven't had any problems. You're making it so that you don't rely on one little pin for the ground connection. You're getting it several different ways. Right? Remember, this isn't like a new design. This is ancient. It's been around a while. Now, that ground trace that we're talking about here goes around and connects to the mounting screws in the back of the back box. Okay? So you know what else connects to that? A green wire. And you know where that green wire runs? It runs down to the power supply in the bottom of the cabinet. So if those are supposed to be separate, why is it connected like that? It's not supposed to be separate. They had a separate wire going from the frame of the power supply in the bottom that comes all the way up and connects to the back box. Here, I'll show you. Let's see the ground. Right, runs into the here. Right. Okay. Goes back up to the top. It's hard to see, but the green wire runs to here and grounds to this grounding braid on the side, which connects to the filter, which continues around and actually runs up into the back box. Okay. Now this connects to here, which is a little strap that connects to the back plate, which is metal, which connects to the mounting board, right? And I think here is that bolt we were just looking at. So this is connected through this strap to the frame of the power supply. It's just, you know, common grounding stuff, right? We're doing the same thing on the board. We're just not leaving that line separated. So if you didn't do that and anything happened, you got any resistance on that one pin at all, your 5-volt would start losing its ground, right? Or the filter cap would, at least. Right? So we're just tying it all together. Okay? Now another one we do is right here. So this is the capacitor for the high voltage for the displays. It's got the same thing going on. So that's the ground. Comes around to here, and it comes to this third pin, which is actually pin 3. Easy peasy. Okay, so that's up here. So here's the ground on it. Transformer bridge ground, a white wire. Okay. it grounds itself on the rectifier board. So you got the same problem. The ground, the only way it gets to that capacitor is through that one wire, right? So we're connecting it from here to here. We're just shorting them out on the board, okay? Instead of keeping it isolated. They're already connected together back at the rectifier board anyway. Same issue. So that's what we're doing. Okay. Now, the last one that we usually do, and we resolder all the connectors on the edges. The last one that we usually do is we connect test point 1 to test point 3. Now, why would we do that? It's a similar thing. So the board creates 5 volts, which you can easily tap into here at test point 1. We just use that because it's an easy place to solder a wire on the back of the board. And then up here is test point 3, which is a 5 volt bus line. This is the 5 volts that runs these chips. That's all it really does. Okay. But they have this weird thing where they run a jumper wire off the board and then back on another pin to run those. It's completely unnecessary. So if you have any resistance on that line or on that pin or that pin, it screws up your bus for these chips. So by jumping it from there to there, you're just eliminating that little loop. You can leave it on there, but you're just eliminating the little loop from pin to pin to make sure that these have a good steady 5 volts from the regulator that's right above it on the board. We had somebody one time complaining and saying, oh, that's a safety thing. There's nothing that's safety about it. If that plug is unplugged, look, it's J3. That's also J3. If that plug's unplugged, you don't have the voltage on the board to make the regulator run. So this is dead if that plug's unplugged. They were saying that it was so you could disconnect it and test stuff. It's useless. It doesn't have any purpose. It may have been that at one point they were going to make this 2 separate boards or something. Like, one board with the power on it and one board with the solenoid on it, solenoid stuff on it. But there's just a little jumper, and just to bypass that, you can put a jumper from test point 1 to test point 3. If you don't, it's still probably going to work just fine. But we like doing that because Clay started doing it, and we think it works pretty good. So that's the little updates that we're going to do. There is also a little wire here where someone has repaired a trace. I've seen this before. Sometimes this line will burn up. This is the flipper enable relay. So maybe something happened to one of the flipper coils at some point and it burned up that line. You can see it's literally burnt in half. So they put a little jumper on it. I'm just going to shorten that a little bit so it's a little cleaner. Okay, and then I'll probably use the other part of that wire to make my test point 1 to 3 jumper over here. And that'll be all the mods. Then I'm going to try to clean up the front. Normally you would replace that filter capacitor, but it's already been replaced by somebody. And after that, I'm going to go through and test all of these transistors and see if any of them are burnt up that we can tell before we put it in there. Okay, folks. So I've got all of my stuff here. Got my rubbing alcohol, isopropyl alcohol. I tried to clean that up a little bit. It didn't clean up a damn thing. A little bit. It smells good in here now, though. Got my Diet Pepsi so I can get going. All right, so we're going to test all of these transistors on the bottom. And we're going to test that resistor to see if there's anything obviously screwed up. Can you see that? I'll bet you can. How's that? How's that? Let me check. I'm going to double check for your comfort. Oh, it's perfect. Look at that. Perfect. So we're putting it on Diode Check, and there is a diode just above this resistor. So if you look, I talk about this all the time, but you don't really even need to know how all this works. You just kind of have to have the general idea of it. If you look, you have what appears to be 19 of these, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. 19 of these. One of them, I believe, is used for the flipper relay, but maybe it runs 2 things or something. I don't So you have 19 of these. Each one of them also has a capacitor next to it. Each one of those also has this little resistor next to it. Then there's a little metal jumper next to it. And then there's a diode. See all the diodes? Now I wonder how many diodes there are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So, you know, if you're designing this board, you need to know what this does, what this does, what this does, what this does, how this blah, 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 blah. If you're fixing the board, you don't really need to know hardly any of that. You just need to know that there's 19 circuits that appear to be identical. So if you measure them between each other, you can figure out if anything's wrong, right? So, for instance, diodes, you know, are easy to check. Basically, we want it to conduct one way with a voltage drop and then the other way not, right? So if we check this first one, it's giving us 0.278. That's pretty rough, right? Let's go the other way. 0.278 each way. That seems weird, but if you compare it to the one next to it, it's very similar. 0.281, 0.280, and if I reverse the leads, it does the same. You know, right? So are those functioning right? I would just take an educated guess. Or an uneducated guess. Look, that one's completely different. I would take an uneducated guess and say, yeah, they probably are, because they're all testing identical. So either all 19 of them are screwed up. What are the odds of that? Or that's what they test as in circuit. Now, out of circuit, they would test completely different, but we don't even need to take it out of circuit. Now, sometimes you can't do this. Sometimes you do have to take it out of circuit to get any kind of meaningful reading. But I'm looking to see if one's shorted. If one's shorted, it's going to burn something up. If one is open, it just won't work. So this is the one I was worried about. So it's a little dirty, but whenever you check it, it's fine. So all I'm doing, I'm just comparing the diodes to each other. The spinners are playing in the background. If y'all don't know about the spinners, you poor sheltered children, you've missed out on so much. Now normally you don't even have to check all these. The only reason I'm checking it is because we have one here that looks real ugly. So you could just replace it, but I think it's just got smoke on it. I mean, I'm not worried about it. Okay, so now these resistors here, I'm going to check all them. Not all of them. I'm going to check the one that's been replaced and a couple other ones. So why is that? It's because none of them look bad. You know, maybe that one's bad, but they don't usually go bad, right? But this one's been swapped. They could have put the wrong one in. Maybe it's burnt up again. It must have burnt up or they wouldn't have replaced it, right? So we're just checking. We're looking for obvious stuff. 337 ohms. So I've moved over from diode check to resistance. So that one's 316 ohms. This one's 312. 316. Let's go back to this one that is ugly. 337. That's pretty close to the other one. I'm going to leave it. It's got the same color markings on it. So I think it's probably fine. Right? So, same thing. It's a little different. You can swap it if you want, but I'll bet that's within spec, right? And if that's wrong, what's it going to do? It's going to make the coil a little stronger or a little weaker or stay on a little longer or something like that, right? This is not a critical thing. Who even knows what Q8 goes to? You know what? Let's find out. Let's see. 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Q8. So the one that burnt, slapped the heck up, appears to be If I look in my schematics here, if I check out the paperwork from 1980, it's telling me that Q8 runs the number 5 drop target. So one of the drop targets. We'll keep our eye on the number 5 drop target. Okay, so I think that's good. The resistor seems good to me. But here's the thing. The board's all burnt up. And people have pointed out to me before that the board being burnt up is conductive. Okay? So for giggles, we're going to check on the back. It's obvious where it's burnt up. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to check from this end, which is this trace, to the things around it and see if anything's shorted together. Now, this isn't a perfect test, but we're just seeing if it's like a dead short yet or anything, since it's conductive, right? So that's the first line there next to it. That's the next line there next to it. That's the next line there next to it. I think that might be the same one. And that one. None of that stuff is connected together right now. Okay? And then maybe we can check these two. Check those two. None of that stuff's shorted together. So again, the board's burnt up on top of these traces. So theoretically, the carbon from the burnt up board could make a couple of the traces connect together. But that's not happening here, right? So that's a fine repair. They did a good job. They put in apparently the right resistor. They connected it where it needed to be connected. Nothing shorted. I tried to clean it better with alcohol and it wouldn't, so they must have cleaned it as good as they could get it when they repaired it. So there you go. Okay. So next up, we're going to test all of these transistors. So I'm going to use the same principle. I have no clue how they work. I'm just going to take my red lead, put it on diode test, red lead and put it on the middle leg, black lead, put on the outside leg, and just see what kind of result we get. Nothing. So I'll test another one just to make sure that's kind of how that works. Okay, nothing. So I'm going to swap it. Let's put the black lead on the middle leg and the red lead on the bottom leg. Okay, so now I get some kind of reading. 0.478, and then if I go the other way, 0.529. Okay? So 0.478, 0.529. That's a voltage drop, so it's between 0.4 and 0.7. But you get kind of an idea. It's not shorted together, so it's not 0. And it's not open, so it's not up, above 0.7 or whatever. It's in that voltage drop range. So it's 0.478, 0.529. So now we're going to move on to the next one. 0.5, which is close to 0.478, right? Similar. Whoa. And going the other way. 0.598, okay? Next one. See how they're similar? Once you do it a while, you'll figure out what you're looking for. You're looking for that, right? Oh, okay, 2 of them are shorted together, right? Now, have you noticed what I haven't done yet? I haven't even looked to see what they are. I know what they are, but I haven't shown you what part they even are. It's not really relevant at this point. I'm just showing you that you don't really have to know much about design or any of that to repair this stuff or to find a screwed up component when the circuit is this simple. This is just super simple, identical circuits that, So I don't see anything way out of spec yet. Now, if you do know about the transistor, how they work, it's a tip 102. So if you do know how those work, you could do it quicker because you have that knowledge. I'm not saying that knowing things is wrong or anything. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying My channel, I'm for the beginners, basically. I'm trying to show people how people can fix these. You don't have to be a genius to fix these, right? And you'll notice, too, you can also, sometimes you'll get a measurement between, like, the two outside legs or whatever. So, like, if you understand what a tip 102 does and how it is, you might, you know, say, well, that's a better way to check it, or that's measuring this, or this is the only, you know, you might know that this is the only thing you have to really check, the bottom leg and the top leg or something. You know what I mean? But if you're just a beginner, you're just piddling around with this, trying to learn, this is all you need to know to check the things, right? And you might go through and check each one of them to make sure that it doesn't conduct the other way that we were talking, like this, you know. And go through and check each one just to make sure they're all exactly the same in that way. Once you learn more, you might learn, well, that's unnecessary. I don't need to do that. Or you might learn the way I was doing it was unnecessary. But, you know, it's just simple logic. We're taking it slow, figuring it out. So all of those tested exactly the same. So are any of them bad? Maybe. They could still be bad, but we just tested them the best we can, and they all tested exactly the same, like they're good. So I think they're probably good. These chips, you can test them, but we don't need to test all that. We're not worried about it. We're just worried about it. Are any of the coils going to lock on, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the voltage regulator up here, you can test a similar, you know. Now, on these, I've noticed before, they're a little tricky, though. One of them will be shorted kind of weird. Okay, so look how we've got that. See how the voltage is growing? It's climbing? It's because we're charging up that filter capacitor on there with my meter. So let's see if it stops or keeps going. It pretty much stopped, and look where it stopped, in the voltage drop range that a good transistor or a good diode is in, right? Now one of these is shorted one way or the other. Okay, yeah, so see I've got between two different pins, I've got our voltage drop, which is basically what tells you usually that a transistor is fine. And if you go the other way, watch this. See how it has a negative? Watch, it'll get down to where it's a short. And then it'll start pumping the cap back up. And it'll probably go up over 0.5, maybe. Yeah. So see, it's going to keep climbing because there's not a voltage drop situation there. That's what your measurement would be if the cap was fully charged. Right. So on this board, between pins 2 and 3, there's almost a dead short. But that's just how it's designed. There's probably like a resistor over it or something. Let's see if I can tell. Boop, 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 boop. There is a pin 2. Yeah, there is a resistor that connects those two pins together. So that's why it's almost a short. You're measuring across a resistor. If I was to use the diode test on one of these 330 ohm resistors, you know, you get a pretty low, you don't get the voltage drop. It's closer to a short because there's 330 ohms resistance. All right, so we think this isn't shorted to any of the carbon around it. This diode seems good. This resistor seems good. All of these test good. This seems good. Well, just my quick little check, it seems good. All the pins have been resoldered. The filter cap has been replaced in antiquity. So high voltage, we can check that as well. So first thing we'll check is, let's see if the fuse is any good. Yes. So notice how I'm checking it. I'm checking it on the actual fuse holder instead of on the actual fuse. Because it could be that the fuse is good, but the fuse holder is dirty, or the pin, it's broken or something. So it's better to check it away, right? So I'm getting, did I get 5 ohms earlier? 5.6 ohms resistance. And notice I'm not using the continuity check like the noise thing. You can do that, but it's not as... I like seeing the ohms, just seeing how much resistance is across the fuse. You want it to be down below 1 or so, usually. Now, why is this one higher than that, and I'm saying it's good? It's because it's a very low amperage fuse. This is like a 0.2 or something like that, or quarter amp fuse. Once they get down below about 1 amp, it's just, that's how they are, right? So if you take like an 8 amp fuse and check across it, I shouldn't really do it like this because my skin's conductive too, but see, you get very little resistance. It's down below 1, right? If you take a half amp fuse, you're up over 1, right? And let's see if I got any that are even lower than that. So this is a quarter amp. 5 ohms resistance on a quarter amp fuse. It's just because the little wire in there, I guess, is so small that it doesn't like my meter. So, if that thing was blown, you wouldn't get any connection. It would be, or it would be really high. So you'd get like 8K resistance, something like that, right? So that fuse is fine. And so we have these 3 I call everything a transistor, but I don't know that they all are all transistors, but you got those 3. You also have a couple diodes here. Now, a lot of times you will also have, put it on Diode Check, a lot of times you will also have burnt up resistors in this area. So that was 0.511 one way and 0.8 something the other way. That's cool. And then they got this one. So why is it jumping around? It's because there's dirt all over the pins on the diode. 0.591 that way. Open that way. This one's actually a Zener diode. Sometimes whenever you have those, it'll the voltage drop will be higher. It'll be 0.9 or something on a good one. It just depends, I guess, on what the voltage is or whatever. But sometimes you'll have burnt up resistors here. All these look super clean, like there hasn't been a problem. This capacitor you can replace if you're getting a lot of flickering on your displays. It's probably this capacitor, but it doesn't really cause a problem that will mess anything up. It'll just, the displays will have a little bit of motion in them. Yeah, so these 3. So how are we going to check those? What I've found with these is, if one of them's bad, it'll make like 2 or 3 of them test bad. So you can use the same test that I'm always doing. So I'm literally just going between the middle leg and the outside, 0.569, 0.511. So if you get, you got 3 legs. If you get a relationship between 2 of them that's 0.5 and the other one's 0.5 or somewhere around that, it's probably fine. And then this one, another thing, it seems like usually they're in pairs that are opposite, so sometimes you have to reverse the leads. Yeah, see, there's what I was talking about earlier. So that's a high, that's basically like an open because it's up above 0.6. This particular one's at 2 something, right? So I think those are fine. So this one over here I think is always tricky. I think one way it is shorted or something. 0.511. Yeah, 0.206. So maybe between this one and this one. Yeah, it's 0.5, 0.5. It's probably fine. Now, again, if you know what you're doing, you know what that chip is, that thing is, you can look it up and say, oh no, this is the base, this is the collector, this is the emitter. You should check between the base and the emitter, and then between the base and the collector, and since it's a blah, 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 you should see a voltage drop of about 0.4. But you don't really need to know all that. You need to just peck around a little bit, and you can kind of tell. You're looking for something that's that, and we didn't find that. So I think we're good. So my opinion, all 3 of those are fine. None of the resistors are messed up. The diode's checked out fine. The voltage regulator over here checked out fine. It's a 7805 on this one. All of the tip 102s tested fine. All the resistors tested fine. All the diodes tested fine. I resoldered all the connections. There's nothing left to do but test it in the game. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go test it in the game and see what kind of voltages we get out of it. Okay, so I've mounted it back in. The screws were missing, but I got nice fresh screws here. We're going to plug in just the top connector because that's where the voltage goes in, but it's also where some of the voltage goes out. So because of that, we have to unplug everything else, but I'll show you that. Look at this too. See that black goo looking stuff in there? That is this mystery in Stern pinball machines. They put some kind of crap on them at the factory, and some of the pins will get this black goo on them. Sometimes it's green. I don't know what the hell it is. But, so we may need to replace that pin, whichever one it is. But, of course, everything's turned off right now. We'll go ahead and mount that on there. We may need to replace some of those pins, but we'll see. We're not going to plug this one in yet for now. I've got everything else unplugged from the board. And since this sends out 5 volts, I think, this sends out the 5 volts as well, we're going to unplug the rest of the boards. So the power comes in the MPU right here, so I've unplugged that. The power comes in the soundboard here, I've unplugged that. And then this is the speech board. This connector here connects to there, and then the lamp board. Normally on a game it just connects to the lamp board, but Stern was able to hack in a speech board. So with this connected, none of that's getting power either. Let me unplug this one. I think that might be power as well. And then, since this is the high voltage for the displays, I've unplugged the last 2 displays. So none of the displays are plugged in. Again, like I was saying, we go from the wall. So the power comes in, powers the rectifier board, and then up to here. We don't want any of this stuff plugged in because we don't know if this is any good yet. We think it is. It might be, but we don't know. All right, so I'm going to turn it on and smoke test. You see anything burning up? I'm literally looking for smoke. Smoke test is a smoke test in one of these. Everything looks cool. Okay. So next up, we're going to test voltages. Smoke test. Smoke test, smoke test. All right. I got my multimeter here. We're going to try not to fry anything. Our ground, you can get the ground anywhere since it's, we tied all of them together. But if you're careful, ooh, there is a ground test point there. Looking at our DC voltages. Okay, so test point 5 is where the 12 volts comes in off of the bottom rectifier. And that is happening. 14.5. It's strong. It's strong. So then that gets turned into 5 volts by this. Let's see if that's happening. Test point 1 right here. .47. Again, very strong. Maybe a little too strong. I don't know. We'll have to think about that. That's pretty strong. These ones down here, I think all of these end up being 5 volts. Yep, 5.47, 5.47, and that one's the one that we actually tied to it. Okay, so our 5 may be a little high. 5.47 is pretty nuts. Maybe it's just because there's not much of a load on it, but I don't know that it'll go down much lower than that. Okay, so now we're going to test the voltages here on the high voltage. This is a little, you got to be careful. I mean, this is 200 volts. Okay, so this test point 2, usually there's another one, I thought, but some of them have it, some of them don't. This test point 2 will probably be the regulated voltage going out. So we're very carefully going to check that. 208 volts. So here's what I'm going to do. Very carefully, I'm going to, you know what, I better not do that. I don't know if that's got 208 volts on it. My luck, they're running it through the damn wheel. see if we turn it up, if it turns it up or down. I'm thinking it may be backwards. Okay. Yeah. So 197. But we kind of got the same thing where there's no load on it yet, you know. $184, that's a little better. Okay, so our voltage regulator is working, 5.4 volts. Man, that's a little high. I kind of want to plug in that MPU though. 5.4 volts, and the display is at 185 is about perfect. You might want to get it even a little lower than that. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn it off. We're going to plug in the MPU. Then we're going to watch for the flash code and see if it'll even try to boot. It's got some little bit of corrosion down there, but not a ton. And we'll just see if we get lucky. But usually 5.4, you probably got to do something about that. So I'm going to test it just to see if it'll boot the board, and if not, we'll replace the voltage regulator and see if we can get that voltage down. Okay, so I plugged in just the MPU board, and we're going to see if we get any luck out of that LED. Now these have a boot up sequence that will flash one quick time and then 7 times if the board's working. The chances of that happening are very low, but we'll see. Okay. One flash, 1, 2, okay, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Holy crap. Yep, she's working. Okay, man, that is crazy. I forgot on these. This is the Stern MPU 200. It's the second version of it. It has 2 5101 RAM chips. So between the first and the second flash, there's a longer pause because it's running all the math. It's checking all of the addresses inside that RAM. I cannot believe that thing's working. Crazy. So the display info is here. These are switches and returns. We're going to plug in a couple displays, which have not been rebuilt, but we've got the power, we believe, correct, although the 5 might be a little high. All right, so we're going to try it again. You know what? Hell, let's go all out. Let's plug in the soundboard. And the displays. Maybe we'll get it to garble something at us. Lamp board. I'm trying to do all this one-handed. Not the best way to do it. But I get by. Oh, this is switches and stuff. We're still missing some things, so that doesn't plug in yet. Okay, all right, so we may get sound, probably not. Soundboard probably doesn't work. Yeah, we may get displays, but we haven't rebuilt the displays. Let's see if it'll do it again. Quick flash, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I heard sound. Well, that's pretty cool. So why is that tripping? Well, we haven't done anything with those yet. And we haven't even touched the MPU yet. But essentially, the game is up and running. We don't have the playfield in it yet. I'm not plugging that all in. But Wow. So let's test the voltage on that solenoid board and see if it's any different once it's booted. If it's still high, we're going to have to mess with that before we go on. Yeah, we're still at 5.46. That's too darn high. All right, so bam, much better. Got it at 5.21. Now, how did I do that? I cut out a little resistor. I remembered seeing something on Pinside that I noticed a while back, and I figured I'd go back and check that out. So let me show you what I did. Now, I clearly am not an electrical engineer, so feel free to chime in below and tell me what you think about this hack. And that's what it is a hack. Back in the day, the line voltage in the walls was lower. Okay, you can adjust for that at the transformer, but if you watch the video where we did the power supply, that rectifier board's putting out over 14 volts. And you just saw it earlier whenever we tested this test point right here. Instead of 11.9 volts, I had 14 something, right? So the way they used to handle that, if I can get this to focus for you, is, you know what, I think I turned off the autofocus. That's our whole problem. There we go. That's a little better. Okay, so it's an LM323, okay? 12 volts coming in, but I'm got like 14 something. Now the regulator should knock that back down to 5 volts, right? But what's going on is they got this little trick circuit here, right? So they have a 4.7 ohm resistor tying the regulator to ground. On the Bally, they have a 2.2 ohm resistor, okay? And then they have this 100 ohm load on the output and the, I guess that's the base, I don't know. So they have this 100 ohm resistor, and what that does is it raises the voltage a little bit. Because they're trying to correct for power loss in the lines and things like that. So they're trying to get the voltage from 5 up to about 5.2. But the problem is, our voltage coming in is really high. So even if you replace that, you end up with not necessarily the right voltage, right? Now the one that's in there is a 7805, but I believe you can do an LM323 or a 7805. Might be wrong about that. I see both in the boards all the time, so half of them have one, half of them have the other. So anyway, this resistor in a high voltage condition isn't really necessary. So if you cut out this resistor, it'll drop about 1/4 volt off of your output. So I simply cut out R49 and it got me to 2.21, which is perfect. I mean 5.21, which is perfect. The chips want about 5 volts, but you're going to lose a little voltage through the lines, getting from here over to the chips on the MPU and all of that. So 5.2 is where I like it. A lot of people, I think, just leave it running and don't even check that, and then that thing would run at 5.4 or whatever it was. It's going to burn stuff up eventually. Because I think the chips, the specs are supposed to be like 5.25s as high as it wants to go. Right? So I cut out R49, simple to do, and now the board kind of works a little better with a high voltage coming in. So there we go. Okay, so I looked up more information. So it has a 78H05 in it, which is the 5 amp version. The LM323 is a 3 amp version, and a 7805, just a regular one, would be a 1 amp version. So it's a 5 amp instead of a 3 amp, so it's actually a little bit of an upgrade. And apparently the over voltage thing is pretty common, and the Sterns are worse than the Ballys. So because it's a 4.7 instead of a 2.2 K resistor. They said you can also fix that by putting a dead short across R50, so that's directly tied to ground. Would be another way of doing it. But I think we're good. And the displays look a little better too. Now we're getting a high score. It probably didn't like us juicing it that high. That's why you got to check things, people. But now we know. Pretty cool. All right, so there you go. I hope you enjoyed the video. Next time we will probably work on the MPU, get a little bit farther. We're trying to get it reliable. Like, you know, we went through all this trouble, but now we don't have to mess with that anymore. We went through all this trouble. I've checked everything. We don't have to mess with that anymore. Hopefully. Hopefully she's good to go, right? And next time we're going to get over here and do the same there. We're trying to make this reliable for our customer. And we'll get to the fun part later, but this is fun too, you know. We got to bring this sucker back from the dead. Do you see how that board wanted to just stand up and work for us? I have this theory that I've had for a long time. There's a channel here on YouTube, Vice Grip Garage. Have you seen that guy? He goes and he gets these old cars that are beat all to crap, and he fixes them up, and he basically tries to see if he can get them to run again. And so he go get something that's been abandoned in the woods, and he changes the starter and puts a gas tank in it and gets the damn thing to start up again. And he said in one of his videos that the thing wants to run. I've been saying that for forever. That's right, I said for forever. I've been saying it forever. This pinball machine only has one purpose in life. It's not a table. It's not a damn safe. It's not just to look at. It's to play. It wants to play. It was built by humans to entertain people. That's its only purpose. And so it wants to do that. Everything's trying to cooperate. It just needs a little help. It's been abused for so long. They started tearing parts off of the thing, right? It just needs somebody like me or you to take the time to go through it, help it out a little bit. So, you know, like whenever we were doing this, we didn't have to replace that or that or that or any of that. Or any of those, or any of those. Most of the stuff's still doing what it's supposed to do. It was built for a purpose, and it will work towards that purpose, even though it's an inanimate object. Right? So the guy on Vice Grip Garage was saying the same thing about cars, and he's absolutely right. You go get an old Chevelle or something, most of the damn thing wants to be a car. It was built for the road. It doesn't want to sit out in the field. It wants to get rolling again. Right? So if you work on it a little bit, they start coming back. So I hope you enjoyed it. This one's coming back. It's coming along very nicely. I'm very proud of it. Next time we'll work on those boards over there. But leave your comments below. Let us know what you think. Make sure to give us a thumbs up for taking the trouble to film it for you and hang out with you tonight. Yeah. Pretty cool. So, we'd like to thank everybody that's been using our links down below. If you don't know about that, if you are looking to buy anything for, it's right here at Christmas. It's probably too late by the time you see this, but maybe you're going to buy something for a New Year's party for somebody. Right? We filmed these ahead of time. If you're going to buy anything online, and you're going to buy it on Amazon, if you use our link to go to Amazon, it gives us a tip. So we get like 3% of whatever you buy. So, basically, people have been doing that a lot lately. It's really cool. Thank you, folks. We appreciate that. And also, make sure to check out my brother, Donnie. If you don't know about that, I have another channel here on YouTube that's my brother's. Literally, my brother, Donnie. If you like watching us work on these old pinball machines, if you go over to his channel, you see us work on a couple old trucks, some old buildings we bought. The other day, we was working on an old bandsaw. So there's more to be had. So go check that out. He's a little crazier than I am, though, so don't say you weren't warned. So we appreciate you hanging out with us tonight. We'll work on this thing again tomorrow, and we'll see you on that video. Have a good evening.